Welcome, everyone. My name is Meredith LaChapelle, and I'm a member of the Bates Alumni Engagement Team. I am really happy to see many of you, new and familiar faces alike, attending our fifth program in this year's Alumni Professional Development Series. Bates Alumni Engagement is pleased to be working with the team at Lighthouse Career Associates, led by Bates' very own Ann Shields, class of 1980, and also parent of Keenan, class of 2018. A few housekeeping items before I introduce our lovely speaker today. This program is being recorded, as you may have noticed. If during the presentation you prefer to watch it via gallery or speaker view, you can toggle between those options in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Out of respect for Anne, everyone will be muted during the presentation. However, if you do have questions during the program, please feel welcome to either raise your hand or enter your question into the chat. I will also add that given the time that we have allotted for the program today, any questions that are saved until the end will be answered and also included in the recording, just to be sensitive of everyone's time. And the recording will be shared with everyone here, as well as anyone who had registered for the program within the coming days. With all of that behind us, it's now my pleasure to formally introduce today's featured speaker, as you may have noticed, Ann Shields. Welcome, Ann, and thanks for being with us today. Ann Shields'
Meredith.
business, Lighthouse Career Associates, offers professional development opportunities to people at any stage of their careers. Ann is a Bates graduate, as I mentioned, from the class of 1980, and also a parent of Keenan, class of 2018. She has 30 plus years of career coaching experience, primarily with liberal arts graduates and students. Ann has worked at several of the top tier liberal arts colleges and has consulted at or worked closely with dozens more. Please join me in welcoming Ann.
Hi, everybody. I'm not sure how many memes there are that have the message, this meeting should have been an email, but we've all been in way more than our fair share of those. This topic could go in lots of different directions, and I'm prepared to have it go in lots of different directions. I may be doing a little bit more tap dancing with it, though, because I really want to focus on the issues that are brought up by the group. So I'm looking to have 2 breakout sessions and a poll, and those will guide me at the beginning and at the middle in terms of the topics that are most important to the participants. Any other questions, throw in the chat. I had several questions sent to me as part of the registration. I'll try to address those during the presentation. If not, I will get them at the end. So Meredith, we could go with the first first poll, sorry. I'm trying to figure out with this poll who's here. We have a lot of different classes represented. I think 40 years of classes spread. So I'm looking at who's here. Are you tend to be the leader of the meetings, or do you tend to be the victim, the participant in meetings? Okay. Not bad. Okay, now the second question. I'm trying to, you know how the doctor always says, what's your pain level on a 1 to 10? This is a similar kind of question. Question 2. How many meetings on average do you attend each week? So the pain level is probably around a 6, I would guess. Thanks, Meredith. I appreciate it. Okay. Can they see the results? Yep. Okay, great. Okay. I'm trying to advance. There we go. So everybody, almost everybody shares the same thought about meetings. I don't have to read it to you. You're pretty much living it. It's interesting to see what Shopify has done by basically declaring a moratorium on meetings that have more than 2 people. I'm really curious on how that's going to go. It's gotten very mixed results. Publicly, some people are giving it a standing ovation. Other people are warning of doom and gloom. We'll see. I'd like us to go into the first breakout room, and Meredith will put the question in the chat. But this is where I would really like to hear from you, where good meetings go bad. What I'm looking for here is for you to do a quick brainstorm after you introduce yourselves, of course, do a quick brainstorm. And then in the chat, one person post the 3 top derailments that you'd like addressed. So a derailment is what make the readings go bad. Maybe it's someone who talks too much. Maybe it's a meeting with no agenda. Whatever it is, brainstorm your reasons on why they derail, and then pick 3 to share, and that will direct me in the first half of the presentation. Okay, ready, set, go. Thanks again, Meredith.
Sure thing. They will be open in just one moment. So keep your eyes peeled and let me know if you have any trouble.
Welcome back, everyone. Would one person from each group please be sure to put your top 3 into the chat, and that's where we'll go from. And while those are coming in, oh my, I can move things around here. I did have a question that came in prior saying, how do I get my boss to run meetings better? Oh, that's a great question, I think, and not an easy one. It depends on your seniority in the group to answer that person's question. It will help if you have the support of other people who attend, who think the meetings really could be more efficient. It helps to have that conversation in advance of talking with your boss to make sure that you're not going to be left standing alone with that comment. You can also, if the boss knows the meeting isn't going well, you might propose a couple people in the room sit and observe a few meetings, take some notes, and then offer suggestions, or offer to help the boss organize the meetings. These are all a little bit tricky, and some potential political risk. If there are people in the room who are more senior than you who also agree the meetings are could be improved, draw them in as quickly as you can and let them be the person who delivers the news to the person who leads the group.
So Anne,
Mhm.
we have 2 no agendas.
Oh.
And then we have an agenda but don't set time limits for the agenda items. Participants don't have time to prepare for meetings in advance. Not prepared. Leader speaks first and shuts down any chance for participation. Over speaking. Too many people in the meeting. Am I going too fast? No accountability for next steps from previous meetings, so return to the same items each time. Rabbit holing into a topic area that is not relevant or not relatable to the topic of the meetings. Distracting behavior, typing, clicking, not having a decision-making person in the meeting, and having an org culture that encourages some people to speak and others not to. Unclear goals and focusing on should have yesterday. Or even if it's relevant, but they keep repeating it, and no consent agenda, so stuck in the weeds.
I've never experienced any of those things. I cannot believe that these are the top things for you folks. I just can't believe it. All right, this could be pretty good. I'm going to try to spend the next 15 minutes addressing these different pieces. I will come at it in two different ways. As for a leader of the group, and if you're a member of the people who are in the situation where you had to say these are the things at derail meetings. And then I'd like to shift over to talk about remote and hybrid, which have all of the same problems as in-person meetings, only more so. So when Shopify said no more meetings, I completely understand why, but there are reasons to bring people together. The new hires, the Gen Zers who never got to meet people during COVID, have really suffered emotionally and professionally from not having those connections at work. So meetings are important, but there are other ways to share information. And there's other ways to learn. But learning something would be bringing someone in from outside and sharing perhaps a professional development topic, something new and different that everybody could share. Connections, if you're working interdisciplinarily or across functional groups. Identity, so that the team gets to know each other and trust each other. Much of the sharing information, however, could be done in a different way. And making decisions is usually one of the things that meetings are supposed to do and probably do the most poorly. Most of the problems that you described here really can be dealt with in terms of the meeting prep. Okay, so leaders, please pay attention. If you are not a leader, look at these questions and give some thought to any way that you might be able to help influence. You can't control or change the person who's leading the meetings, but there are likely some things that you could do to influence. You have to decide, what do we need this meeting for? And that's one of the things that Shopify said, we're just having meetings to have meetings. They're on our schedules. And so we meet and we make things up to fill time. Not helpful. What needs to be accomplished? Who is the final decision maker? Nothing would drive me more crazy than someone saying, well, we have a decision to make. And it turns out within 3 minutes, you found out that they've already decided it. And they're just asking to be polite, what we think, because they're really not going to change their minds. Who needs to be here? Any group more than 7 has the potential to deteriorate more quickly. There's more side talk, there's more unneeded conversations, distractions. 7 seems to be the magic number. This is tough, particularly in cultures where the expectation is that we're all equal. Everybody needs to be there. Hello, higher ed. It's particularly tough because most of the people who are there really don't need to be there. But if they're not there, their feelings are hurt that they weren't invited. That problem can be worked on, perhaps not totally solved, but by having clear communication systems post-meeting so that people don't feel like they're in the dark. We'll talk about this also with the agenda. There does need, going back to the final decision maker, that has to be decided along with the agenda items. What is this agenda item here for? Is it sharing? Is it decision making? Is the leader going to make the decision? Is it going to be consensus? Is it going to be straight up vote? Is it going to be a recommendation that gets passed up the line? Those things need to be clear with each agenda item with the planning. Who needs to be kept in the loop? Pretty much anybody whose life is going to be affected by the decisions that are being made. We've all had the experience of having meetings happen somewhere else in the organization that directly impact our work. But nobody thought to invite us, even though we might have something to add, or they never bothered to tell us until the thing was already implemented and had its domino effect ramifications happen to us. Is the agenda clear? Is the meeting format appropriate. How many meetings have been held in dark, airless, windowless rooms that didn't have enough chairs? Are we really sure this needs to be a meeting? I think it's also important that there's somebody who plays traffic cop. If you're a leader, it helps if you have somebody else in the room who's watching the time. Each agenda item should have a limited amount of time on it. If you run out of time, then your meeting is too long, and there should be fewer items on the agenda. Someone needs to be keeping track of the meeting. This is one of the big problems of, oh, okay, so this is the 4th week in March, so this is the 4th time we've had the same agenda. Nobody takes notes. Well, some people take notes, but the notes aren't shared and reviewed prior. So we revisit the same topics over and over, in part because we never actually make a decision. All of the meeting is about, let's share our opinions. A key piece, and this answers a question that came in early, is what happens next and by whom? How do you keep the work moving between meetings? You make decisions at meetings, certain people are going to do certain tasks. How do you make sure that when you meet again, that's been done? Okay. The leader is going to play the biggest role in all of these. The leader may have to do some significant work to change their own meeting culture, never mind the meeting culture of an organization. As much as people might not like meetings, they don't like change even more. So it could be tough. One possibility is to have conversations about how do we have our meetings and how can they be improved. I'd suggest, if at all possible, whether you're a leader or you're a participant, you try to move the group to a point where they're doing some self-assessment. How do our meetings, in what ways do they work well? In what ways don't they work well? If you're the leader, you may need to have a little bit of a tough skin because they're going to believe it's all your responsibility. But it's also the participants' responsibility to make sure the meetings run well. Even if you can multitask, don't, because you're part of the problem. Sidebar conversations, texting each other, sending rolling your eyes emojis to each other during a meeting really isn't all that helpful. So if you are a victim of some of the bad meeting behaviors, you need to hold yourself to a higher standard. The what happens next and by whom is going to be very much part of the ground rules that come out of the conversations about the group assessment. The what happens next and why needs to be at the end of the notes of every meeting. Microsoft has some very basic templates for agendas, but they're good. They have the what happens next, by whom, by when. Someone needs to record the meetings. If the meetings are remote or hybrid, then the notes can be kept on a whiteboard, or a camera can be pointing at a newsprint sheet where notes are being taken in the room. That's the big poster size Post-it notes. It's important that everybody sees the notes that are being taken so that everybody sees what's being decided, what the key points are. Because if we rely on our own notes, and there's 7 or 12 or 27 people in the room, we may end up with 27 different perspectives of what actually happened in that room. So one person keeps the notes, and the notes are shared in real time with everybody in the room. That way, if someone says, oh, wait a minute, I thought we decided this instead of that, you immediately get back to that, clear it up, and so you don't revisit it the next time the group meets. If you have any questions about this, please put them in the chat and I'll come to them next. Agendas. Best leaders if they're done collaboratively. Ask people what they need to have brought to the table. decisions that they need to have made, input that they want from others on the team for a decision that they have to make, opportunities for people who are working on similar tasks to share their progress so that they can find ways to collaborate. The person who said they don't have enough time to prepare, they don't get to see the agendas in advance, that's a common problem, and it falls on the leader. Believe it or not, I'm an introvert. You cannot ask me in a meeting what I think about something and expect to get an actual thoughtful answer. I need to have the question in advance. I need to think about it. I might need to write down some notes. I may need to look up some information so I can come to the meeting actually ready to have an informed conversation. As a leader, you may not be like that. You may be able to speak up in meetings pretty easily, but it's understandable because it's your meeting and you've already thought about it and put the agenda together. So there's really no mystery. Part of the culture that you can establish with that assessment, early assessment, and some discussed ground rules is you will come to the meeting prepared. And this is what prepared means. Read this, this, and this. Be prepared to answer this question, this question, this question. Leaders, if it feels like you're hand-holding, you kind of are at the beginning because you're trying to reset the culture and the behaviors. It's going to take some time. Anyone who's read Atomic Habits or any of the recent books on habit changing knows that you have to do this systematically, you have to do it incrementally, and you need to be constantly checking in. Is this helping? Is this working? Should we continue? Should we change? The assessment needs to be continuous. The agenda, as I said earlier, has to say, what are we going to talk about? What's the decision that needs to be made? Who's going to make it and how much time we're going to spend? The reason we need an outside person to help time keep is because it's very easy for the leader to sort of get everybody in the room to get sucked in, forget about the time. And if you have the same experience I've had, you go into a meeting and somebody says, let's get the easy ones done first. Let's hold the big agenda items for the end. And you never get past the housekeeping stuff, the little bits and pieces of sharing where you are today and what you're working on. The leader has to own that and make sure it happens. If there are any questions about the agendas, please throw them in the chat. The ground rules, someone who keeps the notes, the facilitator, timekeeper can also help try to keep the room engaged, but really that's the leader's job. If you are leading, you pretty much will cause your own meetings to go down the tubes if you speak first and give your opinion first. Because if the boss says, this is what I think we should do, it's going to take a very, very, very brave person to say, I disagree. If the boss actually wants to hear what their people have to say, the boss needs to step back and say, I would like feedback on this, and then be quiet and let people speak. Again, with introverts in the room, you may need to call on people. We don't like to do that. We don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable. But with an introvert, if you've given them the information up front that they need to prepare, they will have come with an answer. If you have people who have responses that will absolutely go against the flow of the meeting, they probably know it and could possibly submit that in advance, and you can invite them to submit it in advance because you probably know who the people are who are going to have a hard time with whatever you want to decide. However, one of the things that makes meetings boring for me, maybe not for you, but I get bored when there's no conflict. I like it when somebody says, I actually have a different point of view on that, and it is blah, blah, blah. Or I have a different set of facts that might challenge that. And then you actually have conversation, an exchange of information that has the benefit of enlightening everybody in the room and getting ideas out onto the table. Sometimes it might be helpful, depending on the culture of your group, just to ask someone to play devil's advocate. That's their assigned role. You're the timekeeper, you're helping to facilitate, and you're the devil's advocate. The devil's advocate could be the one who says, hey, wait a minute, why are we going in that direction? We haven't considered this, this, and this. If someone in the meeting has that designated role, then any frustration is about the role and not the person. Most of my meetings have been in higher education, and it's been incredibly civil. But civil also means we don't disagree. And there are times when I've been in meetings when I've disagreed with somebody's fact or offered that I have a different opinion. And afterwards, I was told I was being aggressive and intimidating because I didn't just go along with what everybody was thinking. I don't know if you've had that experience, but it doesn't get the stuff done that you're meeting to get done. If ideas aren't being shared, the best decision can't be made. The group rules are best if they're coming from the group itself. And that can come again after an assessment. The roles can circulate. Different people be group recorders. Different people can make sure that everybody's speaking. And someone can just make sure that when it starts getting repetitive, the conversation stops. It's not, does anybody else have anything else to say? Instead, it's, does anything have anything new that we haven't already talked about before we move on? Because in lots of meetings, there's piggybacking, and 40 minutes go by and everybody has just agreed with everybody else. And you've lost a tremendous amount of time. Okay. I particularly like this one. If you've seen the video of conference room, somebody sitting in a conference room having a remote meeting with other people walking in. If you haven't, maybe Meredith, I'll send that along. We can send it with the slides. I'd like to just stop now and see what the questions are on that first part. I think I've got almost everybody. We have some questions?
Yeah, I saw one in the chat too about the introverts, and this is something I struggle with too, is that we have a lot of people, especially in larger meetings, where it really should be an email, right? But they're off camera, they're muted, and we do have some people that cold call on them. I pause, but I'm just wondering, like, how do you build that like culture of engagement, or how do you get people to maybe, I mean, off camera is one thing because you're like nursing or something, but off camera because I'm totally multitasking, like.
Well, that's part of the problem. I confess that I go off camera in many of the remote meetings I'm in, and I'm multitasking. But that also means that I'm really not attending to what's happening in the meeting. So guilty as charged. Part of the culture setting, along with the ground rules, is what do we expect of people? Sometimes you're just physically in a place where being on camera doesn't make sense. You know, you're in the car and you're listening, or you're at the airport and you're walking around. We all hold meetings in different ways now. But that is part of the culture. I have said I'd like to hear from people who haven't spoken yet. That is a way to get people who are muted and off camera, like, heads up, I might call on you. I will even say, I need to hear from everybody at least 3 times in this meeting, because this is our meeting, and I need to hear where you stand on things. You can jump in and say, I agree, or I don't have an opinion, but I need to hear you, because we need full engagement. And several of the derailers that you mentioned, that you brought up, have to do with the lack of full engagement. So leaders, it may be uncomfortable, But if you want full engagement, you need to set the expectation and talk to them. Talk to your group and have them agree. And when the group agrees to ground rules, and I know this is done at a lot of different places. How many meetings have you been at that ground rules were set and then everybody ignored them and forgot them 5 minutes after you had the conversation? The ground rules can be written. They can be on that big poster note. They can be on the whiteboard. It needs to become part of the culture, and it's only going to become part of the culture if it's there in front of all the meeting attendees every time they're there. You are then in a position, and all the people in the room, not just the leader, are in a position to be able to say, we haven't been really following our guidelines. I'd like us to revisit those. And they can either say it in the meeting or they can say it after the meeting or before the meeting. In order to have good meetings, every single person at the table has to play their part or it won't work. Betsy, I just went off like on 6 tangents. Did that help? Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Speaking of rabbit holes,
I did.
I just went down.
I like that ask for participation, right? Just like at some point, just let me know you're paying attention. Right.
Mhm. And if I hadn't done that, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'll chuck some out there. You saw my comment maybe in the chat about death by meeting by Lencioni. So I tried that in my last job where we go into the meetings, some of the meetings you discuss are some like daily tactical, weekly tactical, and strategic. You can't do a daily meeting and talk about strategic events because that's a rabbit hole that will just suck the air out of the room and kill everyone's time. So the model is basically you have a daily tactical meeting. It's about 5 to 7 minutes. A weekly one where you go around the room, each person, what are your 3 things you're working on this week? So they speak first. And then if the rabbit hole starts, you say, hey, let's hold off on that. Let's push that till the monthly strategic or our quarterly strategic meeting, in 3 weeks. So we don't do these giant strategic discussions at a weekly meeting. So I tried that in my last job. I think it went pretty well, but it allowed us to keep moving. Everyone spoke because they spoke first. And from that initial around the room, the rapid fire, that would drive the agenda of the meeting based on common themes or concerns that the people in the meeting had about an event upcoming or something they're working on. So I got away from the hardcore agenda meeting because of that, because I don't know what's important to our work, to the people that I'm meeting with. They let them drive that, not me. I mean, I have an idea, but let them drive it. I'll be off the mic.
No, actually, if we have time, I want to do some more with this. And I told Meredith I can share a book summary. This book's kind of old, but I really like this model as well. It chucks our idea of how we do meetings completely out the window. It encourages debate. It encourages drama. This is a book that has sort of a fable story, and then and here's what we learned from the fable. And this is what you were talking about, I think. Oh, we can't meet daily. Oh, we can't. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, agreed.
But if you're going to start this, you need to be consistent as the leader. What are you doing today? Are we all heading in the same direction? The weekly meeting is very tactical, and it comes from the people sitting in the room. Everyone goes around and says what they'd like to talk about, and then they pick the topics and then go into it. Monthly, you start going a little bit more into the strategy. How are we doing? Are we on track? Do we need to tweak? Do we need to shift? Has something gone completely off the rails? And the real decision-making, the quarterly offsite, you look at the whole strategic direction. And you do not, these are hard lines between the 4 different kinds of meetings. You do not allow them to blend. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline on the part of the leader to make sure that the culture changes for this. But it really makes it cleaner if everyone comes to the meeting knowing exactly what that meeting is supposed to be and what they're supposed to accomplish at it. Thanks for bringing that up. Another question. Okay, then I'd like this to go back into breakout rooms. This time, I would like the group, you're going to go back to the same groups, to go in a round robin and share what you've discovered are the best practices for remote and hybrid. I would like to do this because some of you are in smaller organizations, some large, everybody has a different culture. I would like the best thinking from everybody to be shared. When you have your list of best practices, I'd like you to get them into the chat, and we will make sure that they get back out to everybody for sharing. I can add some general comments, but I really want to get some better, some differentiation from the sharing that each of you have. Okay, round robin, best practices, 4 minutes. Ready, set, go. So as I said earlier, remote meetings have all the same challenges of in-person meetings and then some. What are some of the best practices, Stephanie? Can you give me a half a dozen or so?
So I've only had one person put some in so far, but I've got have the first meeting in person if possible, email follow-up with top points, follow-up action items, etc., and take note before speaking of what you want to say.
Mhm.
And that's all I have so far.
Okay. Well, I'll throw another one on there. Don't multitask even if you can, particularly if you're leading the meeting. I mean, you're setting the role for everybody else. I know vice presidents and deans and managers all have incredibly busy lives and people need them all the time. But if you are on your phone when somebody else is speaking, you are giving everybody else to be on their phones when you are speaking. It's part of the culture. It needs to be consistent. And if it's a problem, it needs to be shut down. If you're in a hybrid meeting, you put people in breakout rooms. It's easiest to put the remote people all in the same breakout room. Do not. It causes them to feel even more isolated and outcast. They particularly need to know the other people in the group, be seen and be heard and weigh in so they aren't dismissed. Again, if you have a hybrid meeting, everyone should be on the same page. Instead of having the hybrid, the people at home on their screens just looking at the leader or looking at a bunch of faces, put up another camera so they can see the people sitting around the room and get a sense of the dynamics. It's helpful if there's an avatar assigned for each person who's not in the room, who's available by text or email to the person who is not in the room. That way, if the person outside the room has to leave, if a person who's remote has to leave, they can text the person who's their avatar and say, gotta run out, be right back, or internet connection stinks, I'm gonna move, or could you please ask Meredith to speak up? I really can't hear her. It's hard for someone who's remote to raise questions and concerns because, again, by the nature of remote, it makes them feel typically even further pushed out. If you're going to be taking a temperature of people in the room on a decision, try using a phone poll so that everybody weighs in at the same time using the same tool. So you don't have the people in the room weighing in one way and the people at home weighing in a different way. Okay.
I do have a few more if you wanted any.
We have 6 minutes. One of the things I will ask Meredith to send is an article that came out on March 6th in the Chronicle of Higher Education on running meetings. Now it has the bent for the organizational culture of higher ed, but I think it has content that's really helpful for everybody. It has information on how to keep the pieces of the meeting together, how to tie them together so that linked items remain linked in other people's minds rather than we'll talk about this and this and this and this. How do they weave in together? What sense are they going to make? So that, again, everybody in the room sees the importance of each topic, potentially from their own point of view as well as from somebody else's. It's a great article. I'm going to actually, I will send you a print, I'll email you a copy of it because the Chronicle has a firewall, and I hope they won't mind that I'm sharing it with you all. I'll take that risk. I know I like flew and didn't get in depth with any of it. Any more questions?
Oh, let's see. Betsy mentioned, add a question about if anybody had seen or tried the new avatar view that put up a character that reacts when you react, but it's like having your video off.
The new
Ooh,
Zoom feature, and my colleagues think it's really, really creepy, but it's like gives you something to react to instead of a blank camera or screen.
can you tell where is that? What is it?
You have to have like the new Zoom update. I was looking to see if it was Bates had turned it on, that they haven't. But yeah, it's usually under like video settings in your Zoom preferences, and it's like this little, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like it's literally like a I don't know, like a human, like a Bitmoji kind of a person, or like an animal, or but it, like, if you move, it kind of moves, and if you smile, it smiles. It's interesting.
Well, you still have to behave yourself then, because you are being watched one way or another. Well, that sounds
Grace has it
fun.
up.
That sounds wicked,
Grace has it
creepy,
up.
actually.
Very sure.
How are the folks who aren't leaders in meetings, which was about half of you, are there some other questions that you have about leading from the conference table instead of leading from the head of the conference table? Some of reality is that meetings are hard. People aren't taught to run meetings. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but just maybe for your question of how can you lead, or how can you like give input when you're not the leader? I'm like really interested in positive psychology, and something that I learned is how you can phrase the question differently, and how, depending on how you phrase something, it can change the discussion that you have. And like I took a workshop that talked about how, kind of like focusing on how do we frame questions when we're discussing a problem. And how sometimes if you frame it, I'm forgetting examples, but something like, what is a different way to approach this problem, or to frame it in a positive way, instead of saying like, what problems do we have? And focusing kind of like on the negative and on everything that's not working. If you start to frame the question on how could we get it to work, or what is our goal, or I think that can open up space to brainstorm, and that can just change the discussion, and sometimes even like the mood of the meeting.
Yes.
And apparently there's other research that shows that sometimes like when we're happy, we are much more creative. And I had no idea that like simply changing the framework of a question to focus on something like on brainstorming instead of like what's wrong, can have such a huge impact. I thought that was really cool.
Thank you very much. I would love to have any reference source. If you would share it with Meredith or with me at lighthousecareercoach@gmail.com. I would like to learn more about that. Thank you for sharing.
Fantastic. I'll do that afterwards. Thanks.
JJ?
I learned to use my hand to speak and not cut people off. So thank you to my breakout group for pointing that out. So thank you. So I'm a learning body. Two things about that. Hey, Francesca, great book out there called Leadership is Language by Marquette, Marquet. It talks about how to properly ask an open-ended question. Because we've all been there. You ask a question with the answer baked into it, which shuts down any opportunity for creative thought. So that's a great read on how to run a meeting, how to speak to subordinates, such that you're not squelching their creativity and giving them a chance to have a voice. So really good book about asking a question, which you described, an open-ended question that allows an opportunity for free thought. And then secondly, on that note, you mentioned, and you asked about, how does a non-leader in a meeting speak up? I don't know if that's a culture thing. The culture established by that organization will drive that. If they're, all the stuff we described earlier, if they're doing the things which we think are right, drive bad meetings, I don't think you have a chance. I mean, maybe one-on-one, but you may be hosed with regard to being a company with a poor culture. And we've all been there where I'm not speaking up. I don't want to either get flame sprayed or lose another 20 minutes of my life while some leader goes around and around in a rabbit hole of worthlessness. So I just a thought that culture, as always, culture drives everything. And I'm off my soapbox. And I'll figure out how to get my hand off there. Oh, I got it.
Well, in some ways, the organizational culture, you're going to get demoted if you speak up. I mean, you're really going to pay a serious price if you challenge. But there are other managers who want to run better meetings. They just don't know where to start. And they don't want to be seen as the bad guy or the hard guy. And because people are so different in meetings, the manager could make a change and make some people happy and tick other people off. So if you're in a setting where the boss knows things could be improved, or you might be able to influence through more senior stakeholders that there are some other ways to do the meetings because they've probably suffered through them for years, try gently, not as a know-it-all. I think the idea of asking open-ended questions of older stakeholders or more experienced stakeholders could also be helpful. I know we're at the top of the hour. There are some more questions. I would love to be able to talk a little bit more. Thank you for bringing up the death by meeting. I'll send out book summary on that. And this is how you keep on topic with their agenda. You do need to experiment, leaders. Try something different and see how it works, but try it more than once. People need to get a feel. Explain what you're doing, explain why you're doing it. Let them know that this part of the meeting you don't think goes as well, or you've heard this part doesn't go that well, so you're going to try something different and try it for a certain amount of time. If part of the trouble is the culture, then you might use the word experiment. Can we experiment with something? Okay, we can experiment. I'll honor you the chance to experiment, but it's not going to work. But let's experiment. If you say we need to change, there's a good chance the heels will go deep into the ground. Assess before and after. Know in meetings what you need to accomplish. If you are bringing an agenda topic to a meeting as an attendee, know what you are looking for from having brought it, and be very clear. I want input. I want experience. I want what? I want volunteers. What is it that you want, so that you know when your time is up that you are what you are aiming for? Always decide, or at least let people know when a decision will be made and by whom. This is the Noble Light for those of you who know York, Maine. I do one-on-one coaching, group coaching. I've been playing around, well, not playing around. I've been working on some designing your life, small groups for people who are trying to think about what's next. I'd love to talk with you individually. I would love to hear more about how meetings work for you, how you have worked them, or even brainstorm on how you might be able to do some things differently. just because I like to talk about that stuff. Meredith, I would like to stay around if anybody has the time to stay around and talk some more, answer some more questions. Then I do want to invite all of you to activities tomorrow, because tomorrow is the great day to be a Bobcat Day. And I'm not getting paid to pitch, but what I would ask that if you haven't made an annual fund gift yet this year, please, a gift of any amount, just like the people at NPR say, the local public radio station, it doesn't matter the amount. Please just give something to help your class percentage of giving. Bates needs our money. It's a very competitive landscape. Bates has a good history of bringing in people who need financial aid to diversify the student body. Oil costs more, everything costs more. And yep, I know you're stretched also, but please, no limit on the amount, small or large. And that's my pitch. I'm a class agent. I now can say that's been checked off. Okay, thank you for listening.
And thank you so much. I know for on behalf of myself, the alumni engagement team, and also I think everyone here can safely say that we really appreciate you and everyone at Lighthouse Career Associates for making this such an interesting and helpful and really great resource to consider in our daily lives and also professional lives as well.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thanks again for sharing this important program for us. And thanks to everyone here for participating and for being here. I hope that you all found this program to be as helpful and as informative as we did. Please be on the lookout in the days ahead, although I know Great Day to be a Bobcat, as Anne just mentioned, is tomorrow. So you will likely not receive the recording tomorrow in addition to the resources, but be on the lookout and keep your eyes peeled for your email in the days ahead, where you'll receive some of the resources that Anne shared with us. Thanks, Anne, and also the recording for this so that you can rewatch it and take some additional notes as you see fit. A link to the survey will also be dropped into the chat as well as added into that email. We'd love to know how we're doing, how these programs are for you. If you have any interest in different topics that we haven't yet offered, please feel welcome to fill that survey out, be honest, be truthful, and share those ideas with us so that we can continue to offer really interesting and exciting programs like these. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully at the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.